Hello, I'm Chris Long from the Homeland Security and Defense Forum, and I'm joined today by Jeff Caine, the Assistant Commissioner and Chief Financial Officer at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, today we'd like to learn a little bit more about your role as the CFO and the areas of responsibility, including the vision, process, priorities, and how you support the border security mission. So I like to start by just asking, what is your role as the CFO, and what parts of your role as CFO have impact on the strategy and implementation of the strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So just from a functional perspective, the CFO leads the budget process for the agency. And that includes the justification and the presentation of the annual budget to Congress and to OMB, as well as handling all of the year of execution activities. We're responsible for the financial stewardship of the agency and the financial management of the agency, including things like your payroll, your accounting, your audit, your internal controls. And what's unique to CBP is that our shop also manages the revenue collection associated with our trade mission, where we collect about $90 billion a year in revenue, which is only second to the IRS in revenue collection for the federal government. And from a policy perspective, I report directly to the commissioner and to the deputy commissioner. And I serve as the principal advisor on all budget policy and budget strategy for the agency. I'm also, I guess you could consider the primary communicator to OMB and to the appropriators. And really what the CFO does is, it helps position, CBP to resource the mission, and that takes an understanding of the strategic priorities as well as the political environment that we're in. Our operators are the ones that really understand, what needs to be done and how. And it's the budgeteers that tie the resources to the strategy and help tell that story. So as a CFO, I participate in the Agency Leadership Council, which is the agency's top governance forum, and weighing in on what's the art of the possible from a financial point of view. And again, we're the face with OMB and the appropriators. But in the end, what we do is we connect the strategic mission priorities with the resource justifications, and we ensure that that the strategies that we come up with in our strategic plan, that they're funded during the year of execution as the priority. So essentially, a little bit of a watch guard on that alignment.
Now, it's important for industry to understand how CBP works through its finances and budgets. And one initiative you helped create and implement was the PPBA, the Planning, Programming, Budgeting, Accountability Process. Can you share what this process entails and its intended outcomes, and how would you compare this to the way things operated, when CBP first came together?
Yeah, absolutely. So the planning, programming, budgeting, and accountability, just simply put, the first P, planning, is taking a look 10 to 20, even 30 years out. What is the vision, for the agency at that time? Programming was the newer discipline, and that's taking a look, a 3 to 5 year look at, what are some of the specific strategies you're going to do, and then tying, requirements to it so that you can actually put a budget submission together. Budgeting is actually, the development of the annual budget submissions and the presentation of the justification to the Hill, as well as managing in the year of execution. And then accountability is, did we do what we planned to do, and can we measure it? And we really did not have that discipline, early on in the process. And when you think about it, we implemented this, it's about 10 years ago. And at that time, CBP was only roughly 8 years old, very, very young by government standards. And the purpose was, back in 2011, and it was actually, David Aguilar, who was the commissioner at that time. He's the one that actually brought in the PPBA process, that DoD model, literally to essentially break down what we had at that time is about 23 different stovepipe organizations within CBP. And we just did not have a way to make, corporate resourcing decisions. So we needed this model to help do that. And, what we did, the first thing we did was create the appropriate governance structures. The next thing we did was we created something called lines of businesses to help us do, particularly the programming. And those lines of businesses are larger portfolios like border security, trade and travel, your mission support functions. And what that did is it allowed, instead of looking at 23 different, lines and trying to make decisions, it bucketized it into larger, more logical groups, so that you can make choices within each line of business and then across each line of business. And we knew that this was something that was going to take literally decades and a generation to fully implement. Today, I think we do a great job looking within, the lines of business. Looking across the line of business is an area that has come a long way, and I think still needs to mature, but that's expected. Overall, I'm thrilled with where we've come in the last 10 years. When I look at some of the challenges, the budget challenges that we've had over the past few years, we absolutely could not have gotten through those challenges or made the right decisions for the agency without having implemented this process. So, clearly it still needs to mature, but where we are just 10 years into it, I think is phenomenal.
I think there's a lot of questions about, when budgets are enacted, how quick can we get the money? So I just like to ask real quickly, what happens after Congress enacts a budget? Is the money immediately available?
So actually, no, unfortunately, it's not. It takes a little bit of time for the money to become available. And what happens is, typically it takes, after a budget's enacted, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to get through, what I'll call the OMB and the Treasury processes. OMB has to issue apportionments to you. And that's basically, an apportionment is basically giving you authority to spend the money. And then you also have to work with Treasury to set up all the appropriate accounts and to get the cash. So that process takes a couple of weeks. And then it probably takes another week or so to work things out in your own systems and to allocate the money at the granular level. So really, I think what you're looking at is about a month for your operational expenses, things like your salary and your rent, travel, and training. However, for the investment accounts, that process actually takes a little bit longer. We have a unique requirement, and it's a statutory requirement. And that requirement is that we must submit a spend plan on our investment accounts to the Hill prior to obligating any money. And that spend plan, it's a detailed plan, including our acquisition strategies and by line item. However, for our investment accounts, we have a unique requirement. So the process takes a little bit longer. And that requirement is actually a congressional mandate where we're required to submit an annual spend plan to Congress on our PC&I investments, our procurement, construction, and improvement account. So any technology, any facilities, that has to go into a detailed spend plan that's signed by the secretary before we can spend any money. That plan, putting that plan together and getting it through that process can add weeks to the process. So for instance, if the funds are enacted on October 1, you may not see this kind of procurement money until December at the earliest, but more likely January. And then of course, if you're in a continuing resolution, that pushes things further out to the right, which is why so often you see things happening in the third and fourth quarter.
Read my mind on my next question here. We just had Congress pass a continuing resolution through mid-February. I have to ask, how is that going to impact operations and the mission and procurement and acquisition timelines?
Sure. Well, let's just talk about very quickly how a continuing resolution actually works. So when you get a continuing resolution, what that means is, as an agency, you get a daily percent of what you got last year in terms of funding. So for instance, if the continuing resolution is 60 days, you get 2/12 of the money that you got last year. And again, it's not even real money. It's just authority to spend up to a certain level. And what that does do for you, it gives you the money that you need so that you can maintain your payroll, pay your rent, handle most of your operational costs. The challenge, of course, is that things cost more year over year, so you're naturally in a constrained environment. What it doesn't do for you, though, is it doesn't give you any new investment money. That money, unfortunately, needs to wait until there actually is an enacted budget. You have the ability to continue spending multi-year money that was enacted the previous year, but essentially no new starts, which I think is the challenge for a lot of folks. So, the bottom line when you're under a continuing resolution is that you have minimal funding that really helps you, pay folks and keep the lights on, but no new major investments. And I think, unfortunately, in the environment that we're in, I think we can continue to expect, continuing resolutions to start the fiscal year. I think we have to recognize that the government is going to have minimum flexibility under a CR, but that's by design. They're painful and they're supposed to be painful as things get worked out. And it's going to be months into the fiscal year before folks actually get money and it's available to go onto contracts. What I do recommend to folks, though, is when you're under a CR, that means that that Congress is still deliberating on the budget. And what I recommend to folks is always go back and take a look at Congress usually comes up, the House has a bill and the Senate has a bill, and they usually do that in the summer months. And those bills contain a lot of very useful information because it signals what Congress's intent is going to be. The final bill doesn't typically reflect the exactness of one bill or the other, but a lot of times it's somewhere in between. But again, you get Congress's intent of where they're headed in their discussions and deliberations.
Got it. Thank you. It's good advice. Thank you. One of the other things you hear from folks is, sometimes, one account has money, another account doesn't. Well, what's the process? And people say, well, just take money out of this account and pay this bill with that.
Yeah, great question. And actually, it's pretty minimal. Within CBP, we have two major appropriations. We have the operations and support account, which funds our salaries, our rent, our operating expenses, such as travel, training, and that's our largest appropriation by far. The second appropriation that we have is called the Procurement, Construction, and Improvement account, and that's where all of our investment accounts are for all of our technology and for our facilities. That account is actually specified and controlled by line item. So I actually have no flexibility to be able to move money between those two appropriations, between the ONS and the PCNI appropriation. If I want to move anything, I actually have to go to the Hill. And even then, it's actually very minimal on the amount that can be moved. Within the operations and support account, there are also many sub-accounts that you're controlled at. I do have some flexibility to move money between those sub-accounts, up to $5 million in some cases for our operational needs. But beyond that, very minimal. And what's a little bit deceptive is that, we're an agency that's $17 to $18 billion, which is a very large enterprise. And people sometimes mistake the size with flexibility. And unfortunately, that's not true. And again, it's by design and designed by Congress. Our money comes in for very specific purposes, as it should. And we just can't change that without going through the appropriate steps. So Congress, it's their mission to watch it closely, and they do.
Well, I know we're right in the middle of the budget process now, and so I don't want to ask you about specific programs, but in general, what are the big technology investments? What sorts of new capabilities are you looking to invest in for the future so that industry can better prepare itself to help, meet the needs of the mission?
First, the one thing I do want to mention is that, we were very pleased that the infrastructure bill that just recently passed did include about $3.5 billion for our land ports of entry for modernization of those POEs. Most of that money, of course, goes to the General Services Administration, but it's all in support of the projects that we put in our 5-year plan. As far as technology, it will always be a part of our strategy. And I believe it's always going to be supported, politically in the budget process, regardless of which side of the aisle that you're on. Quite frankly, for as long as I can remember, we've included, border technology or NII in our president's budget submissions. And in the past, Congress has, not only supported us in those areas, but they've often plussed us up from what we've requested. And for 22, we did again request money for technology, and of course, it's still being deliberated. But at CBP, we're always looking for new and innovative solutions, things that can be integrated into our capabilities, such as surveillance and communications. Not looking for just the traditional stovepipe technologies or some of the older solutions, but a little bit more innovative and a little bit more integrating. It's looking at things that can keep our front line safer and give us more effective operations overall. And I should also note that that we also look to modernize our tools for our support side of the house as well. For things like analytics and decision making, and things that can even help us focus on our employees' health and well-being as well.
Sounds like there's lots of opportunities to impact the mission through technology, and we look forward to helping you work through those. I just want to say we're kind of at the end of our time, so I want to leave you with the last words. Any final thoughts you may have for the audience and industry? How can we better support you? Thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. And as I said, technology is always going to be part of our strategy. For me, I think the key message is that, the partnership between private industry and the federal government, has never been more important. The government understands its requirement, and I think doing our mission has become more complex as time has gone on. But we need private industry to help with the solutions. And I think that the more that private industry understands our requirements and our environment, I think the better it can bring, solutions to the table and even compete with others who have similar capabilities in that field. On the operational side, I think, you are well positioned to help, if your solutions can, like I said before, readily improve officer safety and efficiency and be integrated with other of our technologies. I would also say that I think it's important that, you should be able to clearly articulate expected outcomes of your solutions with performance metrics that can help back it up. On the support side, as I mentioned, I think that folks are well positioned to help if they can bring some modern tools that can help improve analytics and decision making. And reduce some of that administrative and manual burden, like in the area of robotics, per se. And if you do those things, I think it's very likely that there's a strong opportunity that there's definitely some lanes for you to be our partners in any and all of those areas.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jeff Caine, CFO from Customs and Border Protection Agency. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.